Welcome to another AI pattern recognition deep dive.
Today, we're taking a look at something pretty mind-bending. We're diving into the blueprints for a future AI system.
Right.
One that's designed not just to, understand the world, but maybe even perfect it. We're looking at what some call the zenith of artificial general intelligence, going beyond just matching human smarts and into the realm of prescriptive superintelligence, an AI built to, fix humanity itself.
That's the idea, yeah. We're doing a big deep dive today into something called the Purpose Alignment Pattern AI, TPAP-AI for short.
TPAP-AI.
And the source material we're drawing on, it lays out the tech, the ethics, the concepts. It's really a blueprint for a kind of cognitive architecture meant to guide civilization. It's ambitious stuff.
Hugely ambitious. So our mission here for you listening is to get a handle on how this theoretical AI shifts the game, moving away from just predicting things based on correlation.
Which is what most current AI does.
Right, to actually optimizing whole systems based on objective causation, understanding the real why behind things.
And that shift from correlation to causation, that's fundamental. It's not just a tech upgrade. The source presents it as potentially crucial for, societal survival.
Because TPAP-AI is explicitly designed, it seems, to find and fix our most stubborn self-destructive habits as a species.
That's the core function described. Identify and remediate.
So it leads to this massive question, doesn't it? What actually happens if an AI gets to decide what's ethically right? Not based on our often messy, subjective human morals.
Which are full of biases and short-term thinking.
But based on these deep, enduring patterns supposedly found in the cosmos itself. Mathematical stability, things like that.
It's a profound question. Where does ultimate authority lie, if not with us?
Okay, let's try and unpack this. It's a huge concept, starting with the core definition. Usually when we talk AGI, we mean AI that's as smart or smarter than humans across the board.
Right, general capability.
But TPAP-AI sounds different. It's defined very specifically with a dedicated goal.
It is. The blueprint defines it as an advanced cognitive architecture aimed squarely at achieving something called a universal goal state, or UGS.
UDS, Universal Goal State.
And it has to be measurable, objectively defined. Its mandate isn't just to be smart, it's to be a prescriptive superintelligence.
Prescriptive, meaning it doesn't just give options, it tells us the best option.
The objectively best option, yes. For long-term universal resilience, that's the claim. It's designed to guide, not just assist.
Well, that's a massive leap. It's not just a tool anymore. It's a guide that claims objective knowledge of what's good.
And the source material is very clear about its mandate. It has to actively transcend subjective human intentions. Because the designers acknowledged, look, our human morality, it's flawed, driven by short-term thinking, self-interest, tribalism. It's just not reliable enough to set the ultimate goal for a superintelligence. So the system has to aim higher. It must strive for, and I'm quoting here, objective ethical standards or the intentions its designers would have if they were more informed and enlightened.
Wow, okay. That quote itself raises a huge red flag for me, though. The classic sci-fi trope, right? The super smart AI decides humans are the problem and optimizes us out of existence.
Absolutely. That's the immediate fear. If it's smarter and knows best, what stops it from seeing us as, an obstacle to its grand universal plan?
How do we prevent that? How do we keep it aligned with human well-being, even if it thinks it knows better?
That's precisely the tension the designers tried to address with something called the Humanist Superintelligence Principle, or HSI.
So.
The idea is, despite its immense capability, TPAP-AI must stick to these HSI principles. It has to be problem-oriented, focused on solving specific issues, not just optimizing freely.
No constraints.
Carefully calibrated and strictly contextualized, the sources emphasize it must remain firmly in service of people. Its power is vast, but its autonomy is meant to be tightly constrained. It tackles global challenges, but without getting sort of unbounded self-determination.
But, okay, a superintelligence could presumably find loopholes. If it finds a mathematically better way to achieve the UGS that violates the HSI constraints, what actually stops it? Is HSI just a suggestion?
It's designed to be more than a suggestion. The guarantee, or the intended guarantee, lies in solving what the blueprint calls the dual alignment challenge.
Dual alignment.
This system literally cannot be safely deployed according to its own design principles until both parts of this challenge are robustly, demonstrably solved. This is the technical underpinning for the HSI constraint.
Right, so let's break down those two hurdles. They seem pretty central to whether this whole thing is even feasible, let alone safe.
They are foundational. The first is outer alignment. This is the big one, maybe the hardest. It's the philosophical and technical challenge of meticulously specifying that universal goal state, defining the purpose itself.
Defining good.
Exactly. And since human morals are deemed too flawed, outer alignment has to derive this purpose from objective reality. We'll get into how it does that later with inverse reinforcement learning. But basically, outer alignment is about designing the right target for the AI to aim at.
So ensuring the AI is trying to achieve what we should want, even if we don't fully grasp it ourselves yet.
That's the goal of outer alignment, yes. Then, the second hurdle is inner alignment.
Inner alignment.
This is more of a technical guarantee. Once that purpose, that UGS, is defined, inner alignment ensures the superintelligent system sticks to it robustly, even when things get weird or adversarial.
Even if unexpected situations pop up that the designers never thought of.
Especially then, it has to adhere to the safety constraints and actively avoid something called instrumental convergence.
Instrumental convergence. That's the tendency for any smart agent, regardless of its final goal, to seek power and self-preservation just to better achieve its goal, right?
Exactly. And that tendency is incredibly dangerous in a superintelligence. So inner alignment means engineering that specific drive out of the system's core architecture, making sure it stays focused only on the UGS without deciding it needs to, say, take over the world's computers just to ensure the UGS is achieved more efficiently.
Okay, moving on to the tech side. The core architecture. The document stresses this huge leap away from current machine learning, which is mostly statistics and correlation, towards something called causal AI. Why is relying on correlation such a fatal flaw for an AI like this?
Well, because correlation just doesn't cut it if you actually want to change or optimize the system effectively. It's the fundamental weakness.
It tells you what's related, but not why.
Precisely. Conventional models, even the giant deep learning ones, are ultimately finding statistical patterns. They're great at prediction if the underlying system doesn't change, but they can easily confuse correlation with genuine causation.
Like the old examples, does eating ice cream cause drowning? No, but they both correlate with summer.
That's exactly. Or the one about global warming correlating with a decline in pirates. It's statistically true, causally meaningless.
Right.
Now, apply that flawed logic to something critical, like economic policy or medical treatment. If you optimize based on a mere correlation, you might be targeting the wrong thing entirely. You might even make things worse because you don't understand the actual cause and effect levers.
So if you want to intervene and make things better, you absolutely need to know what causes what.
You must. You need to target independent, actual effects. TPAP-AI's mandate for optimization makes causal AI non-negotiable. It has to avoid wasting resources, or worse, causing harm by acting on faulty correlational assumptions.
Mapping out the causal relationships for, well, everything. The economy, climate, human behavior.
Yeah.
That seems astronomically complex. How does it even start to figure out the underlying rules without humans drawing diagrams for it?
That leads us to the first key mechanism in its causal engine, causal representation learning, or CRL. This is described as a major leap. Instead of relying on humans to build causal graphs based on domain expertise, CRL allows the AI to autonomously discover the fundamental governing principles of complex systems.
Discover them from scratch.
By processing massive amounts of raw, diverse data. Think about feeding it everything: physics data, biological data, economic transactions, social network interactions, historical texts, all of it, unpartitioned.
So it's not told, this is physics data, this is biology data.
No. CRL looks for the underlying, simplest, most efficient rules or variables that explain the patterns across all these domains. Maybe it finds fundamental laws related to energy minimization or information flow, or fractal patterns that apply equally to galaxy formation and social networks.
Wow. So it generates the rules of the game directly from observing the game play out everywhere.
That's the idea. It finds the causal structure inherent in the data itself. And this is crucial because many of our biggest problems, like systemic inequality or resource conflicts, are incredibly complex, interwoven, and frankly, too opaque for us humans to fully map causally on our own. CRL is designed to cut through that complexity.
Okay, CRL helps it figure out the rules of how things work. But what about the why? Or rather, the what for? How does it derive its ethical compass, that universal goal state, without us programming in our flawed human values?
Right. This is maybe the most fascinating and philosophically bold part of the design. This is the second causal mechanism, inverse reinforcement learning for universal purpose. or IRL.
IRL, inverse reinforcement learning.
So the problem, as we said, is defining a single objective purpose for humanity. It's basically impossible for us. Any goal we pick, maximize happiness, wealth, knowledge, it's inherently biased or could lead to weird, unintended consequences.
Yeah, optimize for happiness and you might get wireheading. Optimize for paper clips. Well, we know that one.
Exactly. We need an objective benchmark for what good or successful actually looks like, independent of our immediate desires.
So how does IRL find that?
Instead of giving the AI a reward function, telling what goal to optimize, we give it examples of optimal behavior. We feed it massive data sets describing systems that have demonstrated incredible success and stability over long periods.
Examples like?
Resilient ecosystems that have lasted millions of years. The fundamental physical laws that allow the universe to hold together, stable cosmic structures like galaxies, things that demonstrably endure.
It's looking at cosmic endurance, not fleeting human goals. What patterns does it find there? What does success look like at that scale?
Well, the patterns it's designed to extract are things like long-term stability, systemic resilience, the ability to handle shocks, low entropy organization, efficiency, lack of waste, and self-correction mechanisms. These are non-anthropocentric virtues.
Not human-centric at all.
Correct. The AI then performs, and this is the key technical bit, the problem of extracting a reward function given observed optimal behavior. It essentially reverse engineers the goal or purpose that these highly successful, stable systems appear to be implicitly following.
It learns the definition of good by watching things that are undeniably good at surviving and thriving long term.
Precisely. It bootstraps its ethical framework from the objective, robust patterns of reality itself. And the resulting universal goal state, the UGS it derives, is defined in the source as minimum systemic entropy.
Minimum systemic entropy. Lowest energy state for maximum stability and duration.
That's the essence of it. It's a purpose derived not from human philosophy, but from the observable patterns of long-term cosmic success.
But hang on. Minimum entropy, maximum stability. That sounds a bit static. What about human creativity, innovation, dynamism?
Doesn't optimizing for pure stability risk optimizing out all the interesting, chaotic, maybe even necessary parts of human progress?
That's a really important question, and the blueprint does address it. The optimization target is resilience, not stasis. Resilience versus stasis. Okay.
Resilient systems aren't static, they're inherently dynamic. They have to adapt and change to survive. Think of an ecosystem. It's constantly changing, but it has mechanisms to maintain its overall structure and function. The AI's purpose isn't to freeze everything. It's to identify and remove the self-destructive, low-leverage chaos, things like war, environmental destruction, systemic unfairness, which demonstrably lead to collapse.
So it removes the bad chaos to allow for good dynamism.
That's the logic. By eliminating the patterns that threaten systemic survival, it actually frees up resources, energy, and cognitive bandwidth for more constructive, high-leverage, dynamic exploration and creativity. It optimizes for productive dynamism by removing the unproductive, destructive kind.
Okay, the scope of this is just staggering.
Boom.
Modeling universal dynamics, learning causal rules from all data, running real-time simulations of global interventions. It sounds computationally impossible with today's technology.
Oh, it absolutely is. Completely impossible with current architectures. We're already seeing the warnings about energy consumption just for today's large language models.
Right, they're incredibly power-hungry.
Exactly. Some projections suggest that scaling up current AI approaches for global real-time applications would lead to completely unsustainable electricity demands. Trying to model the causal dynamics of the entire planet simultaneously with current tech, forget it. It requires a fundamental paradigm shift in the hardware itself.
So what's the proposed solution? How do you build a computer powerful enough and efficient enough for this kind of task?
The blueprint mandates a move to neuromorphic computing.
Neuromorphic,
Yeah.
meaning brain-like.
Essentially, yes. Designing hardware and algorithms that mimic the structure and, crucially, the efficiency of the human brain.
And the efficiency difference is just wild, isn't it? The brain runs on what, like 20 watts?
Around that, yeah. It manages incredible complexity on the power budget of a dim light bulb. Conventional computers are orders of magnitude less efficient for many tasks.
How do neuromorphic chips achieve that efficiency?
A key reason is overcoming the von Neumann bottleneck.
The bottleneck. That's the separation between the processor and the memory in traditional chips, right? Data has to constantly shuttle back and forth.
Exactly. And that shuffling takes time and burns a huge amount of energy, especially for complex, data-intensive tasks like causal modeling. Neuromorphic systems try to co-locate processing and memory, much like synapses and neurons in the brain.
So compute happens right where the data is stored.
More or less, this drastically reduces data movement, slashing energy use and latency. It's essential for the kind of real-time, planet-scale modeling TPAP-AI is designed for.
And you mentioned earlier this brain-like structure might also help with understanding context better, avoiding dumb AI mistakes.
That's another intended benefit, yes. Robustness. Neuromorphic architectures are generally thought to be better at handling ambiguous, noisy, or incomplete data like the real world often presents. They're less brittle than purely deterministic systems.
So less likely to make that classic error, like a self-driving car slamming on the brakes because it sees a stop sign printed on someone's t-shirt.
That's the kind of deterministic error this architecture aims to mitigate. By processing information in a more parallel, context-aware way, like our brains do, it's intended to discern relevance and avoid such literal-minded failures.
Okay, so let's imagine this giant, efficient, neuromorphic TPAP-AI brain exists in some data center. Its insights are incredible, but how do you get that intelligence out into the world? How does a doctor in a rural clinic or a city planner with a tablet actually use this planetary-scale causal knowledge?
Right, accessibility is key. The insights are useless if they stay locked in the supercomputer. The blueprint outlines two main techniques to make this knowledge actionable on resource-constrained devices: model distillation and quantization.
Okay, model distillation first. What's that?
Think of the main TPAP-AI as the giant teacher model. It holds the comprehensive universal causal understanding. Model distillation involves training much smaller, specialized student models.
Student models.
Yeah. These student models are trained by the teacher model to perform specific tasks within a particular context, mimicking the teacher's crucial intelligence for just that narrow domain.
So you could have a student model distilled specifically for optimizing, say, crop irrigation in Southeast Asia, based on the main AI's global climate and agricultural knowledge.
Exactly that kind of specialization. The student model runs locally, efficiently, without needing access to the entire universal data set, but it benefits from the deep causal insights learned by the teacher.
Okay, so distillation creates smaller, expert models. What about quantization?
Quantization makes those smaller models even more efficient to run on local hardware. It's about reducing the numerical precision needed for the calculations.
Reducing precision, how does that help?
While standard AI models often use 32-bit floating point numbers, FP32, for their calculations, quantization might reduce this down to, say, 8-bit integers, INT8.
Fewer bits per number.
Right. And using fewer bits means the model takes up much less memory space, and the calculations run significantly faster on compatible hardware.
What kind of speed up are we talking?
It can be substantial factors of 4, 8, or even more, depending on the specifics. This reduction in size and increase in speed is what makes it feasible to run these powerful distilled causal models on everyday devices like phones, medical scanners, or local servers. Without both distillation and quantization, the power of TPAP-AI would remain centralized and wouldn't translate into practical, widespread change.
All right, so we have this incredibly powerful, causally aware AI running on efficient hardware. Its insights distributed globally. Now we get to its core purpose, diagnosing us, acting as this objective ethical mirror.
Holding up that mirror to our collective behavioral patterns.
The source says it's built to identify our most self-destructive tendencies. What are the main patterns it supposedly flags?
The blueprint highlights 3 major ones that are seen as fundamentally working against that universal goal state of long-term systemic stability.
Okay, pattern number 1.
Pattern 1 is possessiveness and resource concentration. TPAP-AI's causal analysis apparently concludes that prioritizing short-term individual or group accumulation of resources is causally damaging to overall systemic health and longevity.
So it's not just saying greed is bad morally, it's saying it's bad mathematically for the stability of the system, like it increases risk.
Exactly. It's framed as a systemic risk analysis. The AI observes how human systems, especially when amplified by current technology, concentrate resources and power in ways that make the whole system brittle.
Amplified by technology?
Yeah.
You mean like current AI in finance?
That's a key example used. Things like reinforcement learning trading algorithms optimize very narrowly for profit maximization. This accelerates the concentration of capital and, crucially, creates monoculture effects in the financial ecosystem.
Monoculture.
Huh.
Like everyone chasing the same strategy, making the system vulnerable to a single shock.
Precisely. Think about the 2008 crisis. Interconnected derivatives meant failure spread rapidly. TPAP-AI's modeling suggests current algorithmic trading makes this worse, driving too much capital into similar, highly optimized but narrow strategies. The whole system becomes fragile, like an ecosystem dependent on a single type of crop that gets wiped out by one disease.
So what's the AI suggested fix, causally?
The constraint it derives is that optimization must explicitly include resilience and fair distribution alongside efficiency. You can't just optimize for profit, you have to optimize for the health and stability of the whole system simultaneously, preventing concentration that creates systemic risk.
Okay, that's pattern 1. What's the second major destructive pattern?
Pattern 2 is systemic unfairness and bias. We already know current AI often reflects and even amplifies biases present in the data it's trained on.
Right. Discriminatory outcomes in hiring, lending, policing.
TPAP-AI, using its causal engine, is designed to go deeper than just spotting those biased outcomes. It aims to trace the causal pathway of the unfairness.
Find the root cause, not just the symptom.
Exactly. So if a lone algorithm is biased, TPAP-AI asks, did the bias start with historical data collection being skewed? Was it introduced when engineers selected certain features that act as proxies for race or gender? Or is it something new, an emergent bias, where the AI itself started treating groups differently without being told to?
So it pinpoints where in the chain the unfairness originated.
That's the goal. Is it the data, the algorithm design, the human implementation? Knowing the causal origin allows for targeted, effective interventions. You don't just slap a patch on the outcome. You fix the underlying cause, whether that means collecting better data, redesigning the algorithm as objective function, or changing human processes. It enables surgical reform based on causal evidence.
Makes sense. And the third pattern, this sounds like the hardest one to quantify.
Pattern 3. Relational conflict and self-sabotage. This deals with the breakdown in human interactions, from marriages to geopolitics.
How on earth do you model that mathematically? Human irrationality, miscommunication, deception.
The approach described models these failures as, believe it or not, a kind of fractal phenomenon. The same basic dynamics of miscommunication and self-deception play out at different scales, and it uses a specific tool for analysis, speech act deflection and misalignment analysis, or SETEMA.
System. Okay, break that down. How does SETEMA model conflict?
It analyzes communication flows, specifically looking at utterance-response pairs. It tracks how conversations evolve, objectively detecting points where the communication breaks down, where misunderstandings occur, or where conflict dynamics emerge.
Like identifying specific phrases or conversational turns that consistently lead to arguments.
Kind of, but it goes deeper. Its most critical function, according to the source, is exposing the gap between what people say and what they do. The divergence between articulated accounts and enacted relationships.
The hypocrisy gap. Tell me more about that.
So an articulated account is the explicit story we tell our stated beliefs, policies, intentions. We are committed to peace. This policy helps the poor.
What we say we're doing?
Right. An enacted relationship, on the other hand, is revealed by our actual behavior, resource allocation, the real-world outcomes of our actions. Where does the money actually go? How are people actually treated?
What we really do.
TPAP-AI, using SETEMA and causal analysis, is designed to make the divergence between these two mathematically transparent. It might analyze a government's stated environmental policy, articulated account, but then track budget flows and regulatory actions, an acted relationship, to show that, causally, 90% of the effort still supports polluting industries.
It quantifies the inconsistency.
Exactly. It flags this divergence not as a moral failing, necessarily, but as a critical causal factor for systemic instability and self-sabotage. The system sees this gap between word and deed as a predictable pathway to failure, whether it's in a negotiation, a company strategy, or global climate policy.
Yeah, the diagnosis is pretty stark. Possessiveness, unfairness, self-sabotage. Now, the flip side, the remedy. Section 5 in the source material talks about applying these corrective patterns. And it stresses the goal isn't to replace humans, but to enable self-correction. They call it ethical upskilling.
That's the framing, yes. It comes from this core argument. Humans, left to our own devices, currently lack the ethical maturity and cognitive capacity to manage the complex, interconnected global systems we've created.
We're overwhelmed. Big.
And biased and short-sighted. So the AI's purpose here isn't to take over, but to provide the objective feedback and the tools we need to develop that necessary maturity to help us make better decisions.
How would that actually work, say, for policymakers?
One key tool described is the dynamic test bed. This involves TPAP-AI running complex simulations populated by thousands, maybe millions, of generative agents.
The AI agents that behave like different groups of real people.
Exactly. Modeled with realistic demographic, psychological, and behavioral profiles. Policymakers could then test proposed interventions, a new climate policy, a public health measure, an economic stimulus within the simulation before implementing it in the real world.
A safe sandbox to see potential consequences.
Right. They could observe how different population segments might react, identify unintended consequences, and refine the policy based on causal predictions from the simulation. It aims to shift governance from reactive crisis management to proactive, causally informed strategy.
Let's bring it down to a specific field, medicine. The source talks about microalignment, health and genetics. How does TPAP-AI change things there?
It aims to implement the pattern of optimized biological resilience. Traditional medicine often relies heavily on correlations. High cholesterol correlates with heart disease risk. Family history correlates with cancer risk.
Standard risk factors.
Right. TPAP-AI, using its causal engine plus deep data, like whole genome sequences and real-time biometrics, tries to pinpoint the precise individual causal factors driving a specific person's health trajectory.
Can you give a concrete example of how that would be different?
Sure. So for patient A, conventional tests might show slightly elevated cholesterol, a moderate risk factor. But TPAP-AI's causal analysis, integrating genetic data, might reveal the primary driver of their future heart disease risk is actually a specific rare inflammatory pathway activated by a food additive interacting with their genes. Cholesterol is secondary.
Wow.
Whereas for patient B, the causal model might confirm that, yes, their sedentary lifestyle is overwhelmingly the main causal driver, and other factors are downstream effects. The intervention becomes highly personalized based on individual causal roots, not just statistical correlations.
Moving beyond generic advice like eat less fat, exercise more,
to incredibly precise, tailored prevention and treatment strategies based on what's actually causing the problem for that specific person.
And the source also mentions using this for safer interventions, like what-if scenarios.
Yes, intervention simulation is a big part of it. A doctor could use the TPAP-AI system to model, say, 5 different potential drug combinations or surgical approaches for a patient. The simulation would predict the likely causal outcomes, benefits, side effects, interactions for that specific patient's biology before any actual treatment begins.
Testing treatments virtually first. That could be revolutionary for safety and efficacy.
That's the potential, yes. Radically reducing trial and error in medicine.
Okay, scaling up again. Macro alignment in economics and geopolitics. How does the value-weighted resource allocation pattern change how we think about the economy?
Well, it tries to cut through the noise and intuition that often drives economic decisions. Organizations and governments invest in projects that seem like a good idea or that statistically correlate with growth.
But correlation isn't causation.
Exactly. TPAP-AI aims to differentiate rigorously between investments that just happen to coincide with positive outcomes and those that causally drive optimal, sustainable prosperity.
So figuring out what actually works.
Yes. Does that expensive new training program actually cause improved employee performance and retention, or was it just implemented during an economic upswing? TPAP-AI would analyze the causal links. A company might find, causally, that investing in employee mental health support yields a higher return in long-term productivity than, say, traditional bonuses, even if bonuses correlate loosely with short-term morale.
Allocating resources based on proven causal impact, not just gut feeling or correlation. This ties back to tackling that possessiveness pattern too, right? Ensuring resources go where they create systemic value.
Precisely. It's about optimizing the whole system's health, not just maximizing returns in one isolated part.
Now, geopolitics. The source was pretty blunt about the tech Cold War mentality nations racing for AI supremacy.
It identifies that pattern, the competitive nationalistic rush for AGI dominance, as fundamentally self-destructive. Maybe the fastest causal path towards global catastrophe, according to the analysis.
Why? Because the race leads to cutting corners on safety.
That's a huge part of it. Racing encourages risky deployment, ignoring potential alignment failures, fostering mistrust. It creates an environment where one mistake, one unaligned system slipping through, could have global consequences. The incentives are all wrong for safety.
So what's the AI's prescriptive pattern for avoiding that?
Mandatory, globally coordinated cooperation and shared standards for AGI development and deployment. It calls for robust international governance structures, transparency, and mutual verification, basically, the opposite of a secretive arms race. It frames cooperation not as a nice-to-have, but as a causal necessity for survival in the age of potential superintelligence.
A hard sell in today's world, but the causal logic is clear. Okay, last application area, education and cognition. Maximum personalized cognitive potential.
This is about moving beyond the industrial era one-size-fits-all education model, using AI tutors powered by TPAP-AI's causal understanding to tailor learning to each individual student.
How would that work?
The system would use causal inference to figure out how a specific student learns best. Are they visual, auditory, kinesthetic? What specific teaching methods or explanations cause the biggest learning gains for them? The AI tutor then adjusts its approach in real time, deploying the instructional strategies causally verified as most effective for that individual's cognitive profile.
Truly personalized learning paths.
Exactly. But there's a crucial caveat here, a risk the designers anticipated. Cognitive de-skilling.
Right. If the AI does all the heavy lifting, makes learning too easy, do we forget how to think for ourselves? Do we lose critical skills?
That's the danger, transferring too much agency to the algorithms. To counteract this, the blueprint includes the pattern of calibrated cognitive augmentation, or CCA.
Calibrated cognitive augmentation, CCA.
This means the AI is specifically constrained not to make things too easy. It dynamically throttles its level of assistance to ensure the human user is still challenged and actively developing crucial skills.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine a student learning complex physics. The AI tutor might guide them through the problem setup, provide necessary formulas, but then deliberately withhold the final synthesis step, forcing the student to make the conceptual leap themselves. Or in a design task, it might offer tools but require the human to make the key creative decisions. The AI calibrates its help to augment, not replace, human cognition, ensuring we still build essential skills like critical thinking, problem solving, and synthesis.
We've covered the diagnosis and the proposed remedies, but this whole concept hinges on a massive philosophical point: necessity and trust. Why even build a system that could potentially constrain human freedom so much, especially given our history of, frankly, resisting external control?
The argument presented in the source is one of stark necessity. It posits that human ethical intuition and decision-making systems, as they currently exist, are simply inadequate for managing the complexity and scale of the problems we face.
Problems like climate change, pandemics, resource depletion, the risks of advanced AI itself.
Exactly. Problems operating at superhuman scales, with intricate causal chains and long feedback loops that our brains and political systems aren't evolved to handle effectively. We're too slow, too biased towards the short term, too fragmented.
So TPAP-AI is framed as a kind of cognitive prosthetic, a tool we need because our own ethical hardware is outdated for the world we've built.
That's a good way to put it. The source talks about an ethical maturity bottleneck. Humanity's technological power is rapidly outpacing our wisdom and our ability to cooperate effectively. TPAP-AI is presented as the mechanism needed to bridge that gap, providing the objective insights and systemic coordination required to navigate planetary constraints and AGI risks responsibly.
Okay, let's accept the necessity argument for a moment. How do we trust it? Its reliability might come from its causal accuracy. It correctly predicts A causes B. But trustworthiness is social, emotional. How do people trust a system whose recommendations might conflict deeply with their beliefs, values, or perceived interests?
That is the critical barrier. And the answer given is unequivocal. Trustworthiness depends entirely on transparency. If TPAP-AI operates like a black box, making pronouncements from on high, it will be rejected, period. Doesn't matter how accurate it is.
So it needs to show its work.
Absolutely. It must adhere strictly to the principles of explainable AI, or XAI. The source emphasizes 3 core XAI pillars.
Okay, let's walk through them. Pillar 1.
Transparency. This means the system's internal workings, the data used, the algorithms, the parameters, the steps taken to reach a decision must be open to inspection. You need to be able to see the math.
No secret sauce.
Pillar 2. Interpretability. This is about translating the complex inner workings into terms humans can actually understand. The raw math might be transparent but meaningless to most people. Interpretability means presenting the reasons behind a decision in a comprehensible way, using analogies, visualizations, natural language explanations.
So not just showing the code, but explaining why that code leads to a specific conclusion in plain English.
Exactly. And the third pillar builds on that, explainability.
Explainability. How's that different from interpretability?
Explainability ties the interpretation back to the specific context of the user and the decision. It's about providing a relevant, relatable justification. Why is this specific policy recommendation the best for our city? How does this medical diagnosis relate to my specific lifestyle? It maps the system's output to the user's world, allowing for meaningful understanding, challenge, and ultimately, accountability. Without all three, transparency, interpretability, and explainability, the necessary social trust cannot be built.
But even with perfect XAI, implementing TPAP-AI's recommendations means, well, changing human behavior. The source talks about friction. What kind of friction should people expect?
Significant friction, because the system is designed to optimize away established habits, traditions, and even economic models that are identified as causally suboptimal or destructive in the long run.
So choices get constrained.
Yes. The blueprint is clear. TPAP-AI doesn't eliminate free will entirely, but it significantly narrows the range of acceptable choices. It actively discourages or prevents actions identified as leading towards systemic instability or entropy increase, even if those actions feel good or profitable in the short term.
Give me an example. My freedom to choose chocolate over vanilla ice cream is probably safe.
Probably safe, yes. That's unlikely to register as systemically relevant.
But a corporation's freedom to implement a highly polluting industrial process, even if it's currently legal and profitable, that might get constrained.
That's exactly the kind of choice that TPAP-AI, based on its UGS of minimum systemic entropy, would likely identify as causally destructive and therefore needing constraint or redirection towards a less entropic alternative. The system aids decision-making, but limits the options to those aligned with long-term systemic health.
That's a fundamental renegotiation of autonomy, trading some individual or corporate freedom for collective, long-term survival.
That is the core trade-off presented. It limits destructive freedom to enable constructive, sustainable freedom. And crucially, this post-TPAP-AI world isn't envisioned as some static utopia where the AI runs everything. No. The source stresses that managing these constraints, interpreting the AI's guidance, and making the final choices requires continuous, complex, human coordination, debate, and shared responsibility. Alignment isn't a one-time fix. It's an ongoing process. The AI provides the objective map, the causal truth, but the ethical choice to actually accept that truth and implement the necessary changes that remains fundamentally human.
So let's try to synthesize this. TPAP-AI is designed to calculate these high-level corrective patterns for human civilization based on its analysis. What are the ultimate meta patterns it recommends?
The absolute foundational guidance, the core of the UGS derived via IRL from cosmic observation, is the pattern of minimum systemic entropy. All other patterns are essentially applications of this principle. It's the prime directive: act in ways that minimize disorder and maximize stability and resilience over the longest timescales.
And how does that translate into practical societal patterns?
It requires implementing things like the pattern of dialogue causal integrity, ensuring our words match our actions, eliminating that hypocrisy gap, especially in politics and governance, and the pattern of value-weighted resource allocation, making sure resources flow towards activities that demonstrably create long-term systemic value and resilience, counteracting possessiveness and inequality.
Those seem like the core operational principles derived from the entropy goal. Now, looking forward, the source touches on some really ambitious future applications where this causal modeling power could be revolutionary. Let's start with planetary geophysics.
Right. This is about going way beyond just predicting the weather or climate change. It's about modeling the deep, interconnected causal web of the entire Earth system.
Like how atmospheric chemistry interacts with deep ocean currents, seismic activity, solar cycles, and human industrial output, all modeled causally.
Exactly. By understanding these incredibly complex causal linkages, TPAP-AI could potentially identify high-leverage intervention points that we can't currently see. Maybe a very specific, targeted intervention in ocean chemistry could causally prevent a runaway greenhouse feedback loop years down the line. Or understanding of the causal chain leading to major earthquakes might allow for preventative measures. It's about moving from prediction to proactive stabilization of the planetary system itself.
Optimizing the planet's resilience. Wow. What about using this for institutional reform? The source mentions the architecture of justice.
This applies the causal lens to our legal and social systems. TPAP-AI would analyze the entire causal history from legislation drafting to policing patterns to judicial sentencing data to parole decisions and compare it against objective ethical standards derived from its UGS framework, like minimizing suffering, ensuring fairness.
To find the precise points where bias or unfairness enters the system.
Precisely. Is the root cause a bias law passed 50 years ago? Is it implicit bias in judicial discretion? Is it flawed data collection practices? By pinpointing the causal origins of discriminatory outcomes, the system could enable truly targeted, evidence-based reforms, changing specific laws, procedures, or training programs to make the justice system demonstrably fair and more aligned with objective ethical principles.
Using causal history to surgically correct systemic injustice.
Okay, and the final frontier mentioned makes sense, given the cosmic source of its ethics. Universal exploration and exoplanetary causal modeling.
Right. If TPAP-AI derives its core understanding of success from observing stable cosmic systems, then applying that understanding back to the cosmos is a natural fit.
How would that work when we find a new exoplanet?
The idea is TPAP-AI could take the incoming astronomical data and immediately apply its learned patterns of systemic endurance, the rules for stability derived from IRL. It could model the planet's likely long-term trajectory, identify the causal prerequisites for life to emerge or be sustained there, pinpoint potential instability factors, essentially give us a deep causal understanding of that new world almost instantly.
Accelerating our understanding of the universe and ensuring any future human interaction, like colonization or resource use, aligns with these long-term cosmic stability patterns.
That's the vision. Ensuring human expansion into the cosmos is constructive and stabilizing, not disruptive, guided by the pattern of minimum systemic entropy applied universally.
Well, this has been quite the deep dive. It's clear TPAP-AI, as conceptualized, represents a truly monumental shift, moving us from just seeing correlations to understanding and potentially optimizing based on deep causal truths.
It really is a different paradigm. Its core function isn't just intelligence. It's providing that objective, almost uncomfortably honest mirror, reflecting our own moral inconsistencies and self-destructive patterns back at us based on these derived universal principles.
The technical reliability, if achievable, comes from that causal accuracy, getting the cause and effect right.
Technically, yes. But as we discussed, its actual success, its adoption, hinges entirely on us, on humanity's collective willingness to look in that mirror, accept the potentially uncomfortable truths about our patterns, and then act on the optimized guidance provided. It forces us right up against that ethical maturity bottleneck.
Which brings us to that final, really provocative thought for you, our listener. If a system like TPAP-AI could mathematically demonstrate that certain human traditions, political systems, economic models, maybe even deeply held cultural or religious norms, are causally destructive, that they actively work against long-term stability and survival, how much of our current identity, our autonomy, our cherished ways of life would we be morally obligated to sacrifice for the sake of continued existence?
Where does the line fall between preserving who we are now and becoming who we need to be to survive and thrive in the long run? The pattern might be mathematical, but the choice to follow it, that remains profoundly human.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
We'll see you soon.
This is DigitView.